My girlfriend looked at me and said, "I don't feel romantic feelings anymore." And what I discovered that night made everything even worse. My girlfriend, Sloane Harrington, looked straight into my eyes and said, "I don't feel romantic feelings anymore." The words didn't sound angry. They sounded calm. Too calm. We were sitting across from each other at a quiet restaurant in Greenwich, Connecticut, the kind of place where people pretended everything in their lives was perfectly curated. I remember the way she folded her hands after saying it, like she had just finished explaining something simple, like she had rehearsed it. I didn't respond immediately, not because I didn't understand, but because I was trying to figure out when it started slipping. "Since when?" I finally asked. She exhaled slowly, avoiding my eyes this time. "I don't know exactly, it just faded. Faded. Like we were a temporary mood. Like the last 2 years of my life were just background noise that quietly disappeared." I nodded, even though nothing inside me agreed with what was happening. "Is there someone else?" I asked it without raising my voice, because I already knew the answer mattered more than how I asked it. She hesitated. That hesitation said more than any words could. "No," she said, but it came too late, and too soft, and too uncertain. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not anger. Not yet. Just awareness. "Let me ask you something. If the person you trusted the most suddenly told you they felt nothing, would you fight for them, or would you start questioning everything they hadn't said yet?" Because in that moment, I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I paid the bill, walked her to her car, and told her we should take a few days. She agreed immediately. That part hurt more than the confession itself. No resistance. No hositashchen. Just agreement. Like she had already moved on emotionally long before saying the words. That night, I went back to my apartment in Scottsdale, Arizona, even though my mind was still sitting across from her at that table. I didn't turn on the lights right away. I just stood there, thinking, replaying every conversation from the last few months. Every late reply, every cancel plan, every moment she felt slightly distant. It all lined up now, too perfectly. And that's when I made a decision I never thought I would make. I drove back, not to her place, but to her office. Harrington e Vale Interiors. She had mentioned earlier that week she'd be working late on a client presentation. At the time, it didn't feel important. Now it felt like a loose thread. The building was mostly empty when I got there. Just a few lights on in the upper floors. Hers was one of them. I didn't rush inside. I sat in my car for a minute, tried to decide whether I was about to cross a line or finally face the truth. Then I stepped out. The elevator ride felt longer than usual, every second stretching out with the weight of what I might find. When the doors opened, I heard voices. Not many, just two, hers and a man's. I slowed down as I approached the glass-walled conference room, and that's when I saw them. Sloane laughing, not the polite laugh she used at dinner. A real one, relaxed, comfortable. And sitting across from her was Reed Calloway, her business partner. But they weren't reviewing anything. There were no laptops open, no documents, just 2 glasses of wine on the table, and the kind of silence between their sentences that only exists when something unspoken is already understood. I didn't walk in immediately. I watched, because sometimes the truth reveals itself when you stay quiet long enough. He leaned forward slightly. She didn't pull back. That was enough. But what happened next changed everything. He reached across the table and took her hand, not hesitantly, not like he was testing boundaries, like it was already normal. And she didn't stop him. She didn't even look surprised. She just looked certain. That was the moment the entire story in my head collapsed. But here's the twist I didn't expect. I stepped inside, and neither of them looked shocked, not even a little. Sloane looked at me like she had been expecting this. Reed leaned back calmly, almost like he had nothing to hide. "You came," she said. "Not, what are you doing here? Not, this isn't what it looks like. Just, you came." That's when I realized something worse than betrayal. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't impulsive. This had been unfolding behind my back, carefully, deliberately. "How long?" I asked. My voice didn't shake, because by now, the answer was already written in everything I had seen. Sloane looked at Reed for a brief second before answering. "A few months. Months. While we were still together. While she was still telling me she was just busy. while I was adjusting my life around someone who had already checked out. But then she said something that hit harder than anything else that night. I didn't plan it like this. I almost laughed, because that sentence is always used to soften something that was absolutely planned. Let me ask you something again. If someone lies to you quietly for months, do you consider it a mistake or a decision they made every single day? Because in that moment, I understood something clearly. This wasn't about him. It wasn't about competition. It wasn't even about love. It was about timing and honesty. And she had failed both. I didn't yell. I didn't create a scene. I just nodded. Now it makes sense, I said. Sloane frowned slightly, like she didn't expect that reaction. What does? The part where you said your feelings faded. I paused. They didn't fade. You replaced them. That silence after that sentence was heavier than anything else that night. Reed shifted in his chair, but didn't interrupt. Because even he knew this wasn't his moment. I looked at Sloane one last time, not with anger, but with clarity. You should have told me sooner. She didn't respond, because there wasn't a response that could fix what had already happened. I turned and walked out. And for the first time that entire night, I didn't feel confused. I didn't feel lost. I felt certain that some endings don't come from fights. They come from quiet truths finally being seen. The next few weeks weren't dramatic. No confrontations. No long messages. No attempts to fix anything. Just distance. Clean and final. I move on with my routine. Work. Gym. Silence. But the real change wasn't in what I was doing. It was in what I understood. I stopped replaying memories, because I realized something important. The version of her I was holding on to didn't exist anymore. Maybe it hadn't for a while. And once that thought settled in, something inside me finally let go. Not of her, but of the idea that I had lost something real. Because real things don't disappear quietly. They don't fade without explanation. And they don't replace you while pretending everything is fine. Months later, I saw her again. By accident. Different place. Different energy. She looked at me like she wanted to say something. But she didn't. And neither did I. Because some conversations don't need to happen twice. And some closures don't come from words. They come from understanding.